Good evening, everyone. Mine is on something very, very different to our cause. It's a massive hip-hop rivalry between Tupac and Biggie, who you're going to learn who they are in a minute. Happened in the 1990s in America. I'm also going to teach you a few hip-hop terms rather, that you might be able to use, take to the streets, and talk to me about if you want. So it all started, hip-hop basically began in the 1980s on the streets of New York, the East Coast. And throughout the 1990s, it was dominated mainly by the East Coast, and one of the massive record labels was Bad Boy Records, which you might know for Puff Daddy, and also Notorious B.I.G., which is this bad-looking dude here. Christopher Wallace, aka Notorious B.I.G., Biggie Smalls, Big Poppa, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and was ranked MTV's third MC of all time. MC is another word for a hip-hopper, rapper, guy with a microphone, stands for Master of Ceremony. You may know him by this song.
No info for the DEA.
Maybe not. That's alright. I tried to pick the least offensive of this song. Okay, so at the same time, on the West Coast, this record label named Death Row Records was sort of emerging, and they had some huge artists signed to them. One guy was Dr. Dre, one guy was Snoop Dogg, and another guy was Tupac Shakur, who I'm going to be talking about in a little more detail today. So Tupac Shakur, aka Tupac Machiavelli, he also called himself in his later days, was actually born in New York as well, but moved to California when he was 17 years old, and was ranked number 2 in MTV's greatest MCs of all time. So these two guys are pretty massive in the whole hip hop scene, and you might know him by this song, which is probably a bit more common. Again, one of the songs with nothing to play words in it. This sort of natural rivalry emerged between the East and West Coast because they were all after their share of the market. Bad Boy Records versus Death Row, and they basically wanted a piece of the cheese, or some more cheese in this market. Cheese is my first hip hop term, which is often referred to as money in the hip hop scene. If you ever hear it in a song, cheese usually means money. 1994, Tupac was shot 5 times, but amazingly survived after 5 shots. And he blamed Biggie on the other side and Bad Boy Records, which is where the beef grew between the East Coast and the West Coast. Now, beef is not this in the hip hop world. It is problems, grudges, disagreements, if you ever hear it in a song. The beef continued through Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre when they performed a show on the East Coast and were booed off. And Snoop Dogg famously said the East Coast ain't got no love for Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre. And there was this obvious massive rivalry. And then the beef continued through a lot of the music, actually, which is coming on now. And both sides sort of had this back and forth fight. Snoop Dogg's Dogg Pound released a song called New York, New York, and whereby the film clip they depicted a whole bunch of Death Row Records guys knocking over New York City buildings. Pretty obvious what the image was. And Snoop Dogg's trailer was shot at a bunch of times, but he wasn't actually hurt. And then another guy, skip that. So Biggie released this song called Who Shot Ya in 1995.
Who shot ya?
Which was obviously directed at Tupac. Tupac was shot 5 times, if you remember before. And Tupac took that as being dissed, which is my next hip-hop term. Dissing equals disrespecting. And then Tupac had to respond to this with his own song, with heaps of songs, but this was one of the bigger ones, called Hit 'Em Up, where he claimed to have slept with Biggie's wife, in those words. And this kind of went back and forth with heaps of different songs being released by both of them until there was this massive confrontation in a car park outside a club, where on one side you had Death Row Records and Tupac being supported by the Bloods, which I'm going to talk about in a second, and Notorious B.I.G. and Bad Boy Records being supported by the Crips, with their guns out and just sort of facing each other. We'll go back into that story in a second, but first a little background on the Bloods and the Crips. They're 2 huge opposing gangs in the USA, now found all over the world. Both formed in the 70s, late 70s rather, in LA. and both have been known to be heavily involved in drugs, violence, robberies, murders, heaps of bad crimes. Bloods are identified by the red and Crips by the blue. So we just head back to the story in the car park. Fortunately, no one was hurt, no one was shot, but it was covered extensively by the media, and it became really clear to fans and the public and everyone that something was brewing and there was going to be some violence erupting soon. So both Tupac and Biggie increased their personal security, and until one day, September 7, 1996, Tupac was shot several times in Las Vegas, coming outside of a boxing match, and 6 days later he died. And to this day, the murder actually hasn't been solved. Someone had an eyesight on who it was, but no one really caught them. I think the case has just been reopened in January this year with some more evidence. And then about 3 months later, March 9th, 1997, 4 months later, Notorious B.I.G. was in California promoting his new song called Hypnotized, and he was also shot dead by a drive-by shooting. So it all happened within 4 months. Same thing again, the murder remains unsolved. It was guys with sort of bandanas coming past shooting, so no one really got the faces. There's a few theories around the murders. Some believe that they were organised by opposing sides, which seems to be the most likely, and were actually committed by the Bloods and the Crips. Some believe it was racially motivated and organised by the LAPD in an effort to stop black men gaining more power. And some believe that Tupac was still alive, which is, I guess, he's released 6 albums since he's been dead, so that's one of the reasons why they think he's still alive. But if anyone's got any questions, I'll be happy to field them.